Welcome to the Anti-Architect Podcast. I am your host, Christian Giordano. As president and owner of the design firm Mancini Duffy, I am driven by a quest for learning and radically changing the industry. With this podcast, I'm hoping to improve the industry that I'm so passionate about by taking a critical look at how architects work through a variety of voices and shared experiences. Hello, Anti-Architect Podcast listeners. I'm excited to have Michael Leondi as my guest on the Anti-Architect Podcast, coming from our New York studios. Mike is the Vice President of Design and Construction for Development at Rockefeller Group. He has more than 25 years of experience in commercial real estate and construction. Mike is based in Rockefeller Group's Morristown, New Jersey office, overseeing the development of projects in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Since 1928, Rockefeller Group has evolved from developing the iconic Rockefeller Center to creating innovative office, residential, industrial, and mixed-use projects nationwide. The company continues to set industry standards through strategic development and investment across the country. Currently, Mike manages design and construction teams working on approximately 8 million square feet of active projects. His portfolio showcases diverse project types in many asset classes, including commercial and medical office, multifamily residential, hotel, hospitality, logistics centers, industrial warehousing, and data centers. Before joining Rockefeller Group in 2013, Mike was at R.C. Dolner, a construction management firm based in New York City, where he served as project manager for various institutional and commercial projects. His notable work includes renovating and modernizing gallery spaces and infrastructure at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Mike began his career as a project engineer at Skanska USA Building, laying the foundation for his comprehensive understanding of the construction industry. Mike was recently elected to serve on the National Institute of Building Science Board of Directors, NIBS. The NIBS was established by the United States Congress in 1974 to act as an interface between the government and private sector and the built environment. Mike, thanks so much for being my guest here on the podcast today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So you and I have known each other for many years. And while we didn't have many opportunities to work together initially in the beginning, now we're doing more and more work together, which has been amazing.
Yeah.
But I think a sort of a turning point in our relationship came sort of right after or kind of during COVID, where I think you and I were both eager to get some sort of sense of normalcy. Yeah. And, despite everything that was going on at the time, the vaccines and the masks, and you had to show your card, you and I braved it, and we actually went out to dinner.
Yeah.
And this was early on.
I couldn't get anybody else to go out with me. I'm going to be honest.
So we had a steak dinner in New York City, which was great. And I guess I was thinking about that, right? And if we were to kind of take a step back, what did you learn about yourself and our industry during COVID or sort of post-COVID?
Wow. Well, let's start with the industry, I guess, because I'm still trying to figure myself out. But when I think about COVID, we all learned a ton, right? So let's talk about, I guess, the business side first, right? Like kind of what happened. And then we can get into operations and return to office and that whole stuff. Because I have a lot of thoughts on that. But
awesome.
The business side of it, it was really Tale of Two Cities. And it wasn't just real estate. I mean, every industry you can think of, right? Hospitality, anything experiential, traditional retail, just gutted. Mm-hmm. Right. It was devastating. On the flip side, we do a fair amount of industrial work. That stuff, we couldn't do it fast enough. Yeah. And that was really related to obviously everybody being at home, wanting to shop from home. Right. So just when you look at the underlying metrics, it's leading into the pandemic. Not many people realize this. It was only 12 or 14% of the total market share for retail was done online, gaining maybe a point or so year over year up to that point. By the end of 21, that had just about doubled, right? Wow. So when you think about these warehouses and how quickly they were going up, you can't even really fathom the demand that was there. They were only going up as fast as people could do it and take land down and get through entitlements, right? That's one piece of it. Residential, when I think about that asset class, it kind of went bonkers, and I'm still trying to figure out like where it's going to end up, because you had a lot of these like COVID boom towns, right? So you think about places like Charlotte or Nashville, where I visit both of those places pretty frequently. It was just insane the amount of tower cranes you saw everywhere, and I think you still are.
Yeah.
So we're active in at least one of those markets. I would caution the residential guys of straying too far into overbuiltness.
Okay.
Because you still see a ton of it. I know people who have moved to Charlotte and since moved back. No knock on Charlotte. It's a great place. But things change. Reality sets in. Wait a minute. Maybe I do need to go back to the office after all. I can't be remote forever. And then let's talk about office for a minute too. I never really subscribed to the whole, we're going to be remote forever. And I heard from a lot of people in our industry and otherwise that we're paring down our office space. Our employees are just as productive as they ever were at home. And to me, it just never felt right or real, I guess. So I kind of always said, hey, this is going to be a blip. And I think now, feeling validated, it seems like it is trending that way. They give it kind of like the last of the holdouts saying, hey, we're coming back. Yeah. We're going to be back in the office. And that's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
Personally, what did I learn about myself? That's a tough one. Certainly some vulnerabilities, right? Let's pass on that one. I'll think on it and we'll wrap it up at the end.
Well, going back to the residential thing. So I always hear that we have a shortage of housing. Yeah. Right. That's something you hear constantly. I think I hear it, once a day in the morning on CNBC, and I listen to this other podcast, Prop G, this guy, Scott Galloway. He talks about it all the time. Millennials can't afford housing, or Gen Z, whatever generation's buying houses right now. But we're millions and millions and millions of units short. How's that possible? Where are people living right now? What does that refer to? Is that purchasing or rental, or what does that even mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a shortage of housing that is attainable for the folks that need it, right? There's plenty of older stock of, the McMansions in the suburbs. Not many people want to live that way anymore. New Jersey is always going to have a shortage of housing to some degree, right? Okay. And I'm going to speak to it through that lens because that's the market I sort of know best. We talked about a stat for industrial stuff and absorption in that arena a minute ago. On the residential side, it wasn't that long ago that I think it was 2/3 of folks in the state wanted to be in single families and 1/3 in multi. Now, in a very short order, that's just about reversed, right? So you've got multifamily where all of a sudden people want to be part of, be more close to urban centers, city centers, and single families, which are just sort of either unattainable or undesirable. So I don't think that it doesn't make sense, so to speak, that there's a residential shortage. I just think it's kind of mismatched for the need.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's we see the demand here on the residential side. As a matter of fact, we just interviewed for 2 residential conversions, right? Converting office to residential. It's a very difficult thing to do, especially in New York City. I assume it's also difficult in New Jersey, although it doesn't seem to come up as often. But it's a very difficult thing to do because of the proportions of a building, because of the restrictions in terms of getting legal light and air into a unit. And then it just becomes so expensive, right? You have to chop off half of a skyscraper to make it work. It doesn't matter. Yeah. You're better off just going bankrupt on the skyscraper.
Yeah. Office conversions it's a niche play. We're still trying to figure it out, but for every one that might work, there's probably 99 that don't.
Yeah.
So, just to kind of unresidential wrap it a little bit. I'd say a lot of us on the ownership side and the development side focus on the higher end luxury stuff. Whereas I think there's a huge demand for everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I get it. So I'd love to give our listeners some context about Rockefeller Group. As someone who's been, immersed in the company culture now for a while, especially in the Northeast region, I think you probably have a unique perspective on the history of Rockefeller Group and kind of its current direction. Can you walk us through how Rockefeller Group has evolved from Rockefeller Center, which I think everybody obviously knows, the Christmas tree, to today?
Yeah. It's what I always say. Like, everybody knows a little bit something about Rockefeller,
right.
Whether you know the organization, the development arm, or just the Christmas tree. It's kind of like an iconic American brand that I'm proud to be a part of. So obviously we were founded. It's the same company that was founded December 6, 1928 to develop Rockefeller Center by John D. Jr., right? That was on land that at the time was owned by Columbia University. And I think, it's been a while since I read all the historical stuff, so bear with me. But I think it was originally intended to kind of just be a spot to relocate the Met Opera, which didn't come to fruition. But obviously Radio City is there now, and the whole classic Art Deco complex that was built through the 30s through the 50s. West of 6th Avenue, there's a couple of towers now that are technically part of the center that we still maintain ownership in. As far as the family goes, they have sold their interests. I think the acquisition was completed in 1990. Sorry to our marketing guys if I messed that date up, but I think it was 1990. We are now a wholly owned subsidiary of Mitsubishi Estate, based in Tokyo. So, what's really exciting about being there now is we're back in growth mode. It feels very entrepreneurial, kind of leading into our 100th anniversary, which is cool. Yeah. We've got a really ambitious, thoughtful, intelligent C-suite that has challenged us to hit growth metrics that 10 years ago when I joined, people would have blushed. But it's really cool to be a part of, kind of like this iconic American brand that is now functioning, like a startup real estate shop.
And so where are the properties that Rockefeller Group owns? I mean, obviously in New York and New Jersey, but where else?
Actually, just in New York, believe it or not. Yeah. So it's 1221 6th Avenue and 1271 6th Avenue. Okay. Are the primary two that we maintain ownership of. We refer to them as our core assets. Okay. Throughout the rest of our development cycle, work throughout the country, we're functionally merchant builders. Right. Okay. So we'll take down a piece of property, we'll entitle it, we'll clean it up, we'll bring in a design team to put something together, we'll build it out, we will lease it, stabilize the asset, and then sell it into the institutional investment market.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay. So I assumed you guys owned sort of all that stuff, right?
Yeah. That's a common perception, but it's
interesting.
It's not accurate. Yeah.
Very cool.
So you learned something today. That's good.
I love it. How do you think the approach to looking for assets has changed over the years from, let's call it the Rockefeller family days to how it is today? Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question, and it's something I can't begin to answer because I'm only 10 years in with Rock Group. But 100 years ago, that whole Rock Center was developed kind of through the teeth of the Depression, which is something that I can't fathom today. And they also came from a place of immense wealth, right? And high tolerance for risk. It seemed like from kind of reading it. So that's very much different. How things have changed in just the last 10, 12 years since I've kind of been a part of it. There was a time not that long ago where if a property had an easement on it, we would say, we're going to move on, and now it's obvious, especially in Jersey, much, much more complex. There's all sorts of stuff to untangle. Many of them more challenging than easements.
Are you guys more prone to risk these days?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We had a really successful project in Edison, New Jersey, where it was probably the first one on an industrial side that we took a real big leap of faith with environmental risk. Okay. Typically, when a transaction is made that involves environmental, the seller kind of hangs on to the liability. That one, we agreed to take it for various different reasons. And it obviously we shepherded the asset through, a significant environmental cleanup effort. And it paid dividends for us.
Okay.
So now I think we've gotten a lot more comfortable with our skill set in that regard.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So are you out actively hunting for other kinds of interesting properties to maybe, transform? Are there cities that Rockefeller is looking at that are potential growth cities?
Yeah, all the time. Me personally, not as much. I'm more on the operations side, managing the design and construction team.
Right.
We have a team of front end guys who are really talented at pounding the pavement and finding this stuff. We are constantly looking. We have people doing it full time. And I think I'm allowed to say, so I'll just say it anyway and let them yell at me later. But we're expanding now into what I'll call kind of the heartland of the country, right? We've got offices kind of around the perimeter of the states. And just about a month, maybe 2 ago, it was announced internally that our office based out of New Jersey is going to become our North Central region with an immediate focus on Chicago. And kind of, as we start filling out the rest of the map, establishing new offices where we don't have them currently. So that's real exciting.
That's great. Great for you guys. So you kind of answered my next question, but I'll ask it just because I thought it was kind of
you should hide your page better. I can see it from
No, it was a little bit of Rockefeller Group's financial approach to development. And I guess my question was, now knowing that you don't own all the assets, right? My question was going to be, is it a different funding structure than most developers, like going out raising capital, securing loans, things like that? Or is there a mother lode of Rockefeller, cash in a vault somewhere that, you guys don't need any outside funding and you're just kind of drawing on some sort of family fund?
Yes and yes. We have a very strong cash position that we're fortunate to have access to that kind of is generated from those two assets I mentioned earlier. However, it's not uncommon. In fact, in the current operating environment, it's probably more common for us to partner with lenders, other GPs, certainly LPs, and, kind of shed our risk profile a little bit.
Okay.
As far as what our, goal is in terms of financial return, we're IRR driven. So it's kind of that first transaction. So that's really what is driving our pro forma and our financial modeling and how we measure our success.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So do you get to go to the Christmas tree lighting, free of charge, all that sort of stuff, VIP?
Somebody probably does. I'm still waiting for that call.
That's awesome.
I am on the Thanksgiving parade list, though, finally. So we get to do that, which is pretty cool. That's special. Yeah, that's special thing for our family. We kind of close down the plaza in front of 6th Avenue and, take control of the restaurant in there. And
that's really great.
Have a nice little Thanksgiving morning.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. All right. So I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about architects and kind of how we work with you guys as developers. So if you had to pick one thing, what annoys you about architects?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this. There's going to be two things initially, and then we can kind of just work into a conversation. One, I really hate when architects give out budget numbers to owners. I suspect somebody said that to you before, but what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about this, right? Never trust an architect to give out any cost whatsoever, especially when it comes to budget numbers like that on the development side. That's a real tough thing. We can give you maybe like a price per square foot on something that's a known quantity, like an interior, maybe a lobby, certain things like that. FF&E packages, things like that. But when you start talking real hardcore numbers that have to include things that we don't really have any insight into, like systems, building systems, structural systems, things like that, we have no idea how much that costs. Yeah. Not a clue.
Yeah, neither do I. And that's more of a gripe from my GC days, because I can't tell you how many times we got sort of introduced to a process. We were so far down the road, or at least the project team had been already. And then once we started putting pen to paper with actual budgeting, it was like, wait a minute, we've got a problem, like a huge 2X type budget problem.
Yeah.
And it just, devolves into chaos instantly. And the entire project, if it proceeds, is just, everybody's at each other's
But
throats.
I can say to a client, we don't understand cost. It's not what we do. We can give you a few limited things. And then a week later, they'll turn around and go, what do you think? How much do you think this costs?
Yeah. So this is my struggle now, is because now on the ownership side, we have what I call price shopping. Everybody wants to find a deal that's going to work. Right. And it's like, okay, the land price is X. That means I've got to build it for Y. Yeah. And you start working the phones. I found a guy who can do it. And guess what? You know how that plays out.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Yeah, that's a tough one.
The other thing I'll mention is architecture from a standpoint of business and constructability. Okay. I think a lot of architecture firms would be really well suited to bring somebody on staff to run the CA process, the administration process, to liaise with the builder, right? I can't think of a single project where I haven't had a builder screaming about, the architect's timeliness on RFI responses or shop drawing approvals, or the fact that such and such detail is never going to be able to be built in the field. Right. It might be a cliche thing to point out, but it's one that I see a lot of, and I don't think you guys should put up with it. And I don't mean you, Mancini Duffy. I mean you, architects in general.
Yeah, I agree. That's another tough one. We can draw things in an idealized version on a piece of paper, or draw it in a model. Mm-hmm. But how do you physically build that, right? Does that actually happen? Can you join these two materials together? How does someone get a nail gun in there? Or how does someone maneuver that piece of steel into the right position if you've only allowed for a quarter inch of a tolerance kind of thing? And that's a real struggle too, because what we're really good at is design and making sure that, everything about the design is going to go well in terms of it meets the client's needs. It's going to be a beautiful space when it's done. Life safety exists, right? You can get from stair A to stair B and so on and so forth. It's well lit. The temperature works. The orientation of it is correct. What's difficult for us is then translating that into the actual construction process, right? Because we're only as good as our drawings, right? And you're right. By the time, unfortunately, the way it works in architecture is, we'll have spent the bulk of our fee in the design phase and in the construction documents phase, because that's where all the hours are accrued. So we spend all of that time. And so now by the time we get to construction, which depending upon what it is, it could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years from now, there's no money left. Right. And so, the dirty secret is, we put a junior guy on it, and the junior guy's got to go and look through the, figure it out, and then ask the more senior person, hey, does this work? Yeah. And that process of kind of getting through the construction, it falls flat. Not all the time. And we try to put in ways that we can do that. The other thing too, and it's really difficult to price those, right? Because if we were to turn around and show you what it actually would cost per month for CA to be done properly for the next, because that's the longest phase, right? Let's say it's a building. It's 3 years you're going to build this building. To do that, that's going to be 3 times the fee of what you're going to be willing to spend, and we're not going to get the job. So most architects, if not all, even some of the superstar architects are willing to take a haircut in the construction end for the design side, and hope that the contractor can kind of pull it all together and figure it all out with them, and it could be a little bit more collaborative in that end.
Interesting. I'm going to go back to something I think I'm pretty sure I said to you at that dinner during COVID. Maybe I was shouting it through a mask or something, but said I think you guys need to charge more. And again, not you, Mancini Duffy. I think architects in general. Yeah. Because when you look at the totality of a project budget, architecture is a piece, but it's not going to break the bank even at 2x. And, I guess to my developer friends, close your ears. So I'm sorry, I'm throwing us under the bus like this. But to me, design is such an important piece. Yep. It's such an impactful profession, right? It's not just aesthetics, but every memory, that you have is impacted by design in some way, whether it's good or bad.
I agree.
Right. I can vividly remember the pistachio walls and fluorescent lights when my daughter was born. So I think, there's like this dichotomy where you have those in the profession that appreciate that and act like it, and nobody wants to deal with them. It's like the nose is in the air. And then you have those that are kind of the other end of the spectrum that are maybe overly unctuous or just kind of, yes, whatever you think. And there's few in the middle where I like to kind of hang out that will challenge us and say, hey, here's why I feel really strongly about this idea, but not go down a road where it's like, we're blowing the whole thing up.
Yeah, you're wasting time. Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think that's something that is worth some study too.
A point well taken. Architects should charge more. That's come up on this podcast a bunch. That's something as a profession that I think we need to do a better job at, is really being honest with our clients of this is how long we sell hours, right? For good or for bad.
Yeah.
This is how long we think it's going to take. And this is the value that we put toward it. And to do it right, as you said, it's a small amount. When you're building, buildings that are millions and millions and millions of dollars, an extra $100,000 in construction administration, that's going to, move you along faster. It's going to save you a lot of money at the end of the day.
And when you think about just like what a month of carry cost is on a piece of property like this, or rent money not discovered,
Absolutely.
It's significant.
Yeah. What do you wish architects better understood about development as a whole?
Probably, I'd say a little bit more of the front end, if you can believe that. I think, to me, we were just talking about fee. We put much more importance when we're trying to decide who to hire on somebody's ability to sell a vision to a jurisdiction, to sell a vision to a tenant, especially if it's a speculative build, right? We've got to go, make our case to X township or city. But then, obviously we're granted a set of approvals and a developer's agreement. We go out tenant shopping. Somebody comes in, they're a big fish. We've got them on the hook. We're excited. They want the world above and beyond the approvals that have been granted. And they want to be in next week. We need somebody to delicately reconcile those things. And I think most of us would agree, you can't put a dollar figure on that, but if you can accomplish it, it's worth a hell of a lot.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So someone to come in and say, we hear you. We think we can get to this. However, the realistic timeline is this, the realistic budget. Yeah, no, I get it. How can architects be more valuable to developers in terms of, like, how can we help you maybe get a job or win a job rather than us just sitting back and waiting for an RFP, right? Waiting for the phone to call. What can we do to be proactive about things?
Well, I'm thinking of one thing that we chased together. I won't mention the project name, but I think it's really some of that old school, hey, let's commit to each other, to a chase team. And I'm talking more broadly about, kind of like public RFPs. Yeah. Right. Roll up our sleeves and figure out a way to really knock everybody's socks off and come up with a plan that is going to inspire, all the stakeholders involved. And what I see quite a bit is, again, an architect wants to, and many other vendors too, this is not specifically directed at architects, I guess, but they'll want to hedge. Yeah. And okay, don't worry, I'm going to come up with a concept for, applicant number one, but I'm going to do another one for this other guy. They'll be open and honest about it generally. Yeah. And they'll say, don't worry, I'm not going to share between the two what's going on. I'm too cynical to kind of believe that. But I think it's the old school chase that we can all probably do better on.
So how do you look for public RFPs?
We don't a ton. Okay. The one that we looked at together was sort of an anomaly. When they come up, generally we'll get a phone call from a broker who's somehow mixed up in it. And if it's really enticing and exciting, we'll decide to make a run at it. But I think we've learned, and again, that project I'm referring to, we ended up tapping out, and that was an uncomfortable phone call to you because you guys were all into it and put a bunch of time and effort.
We got some nice renderings out of it. We've used those. Yeah. Confidential client is what it says.
Right. So it's not something I should really be commenting on too much because it's a pretty discreet thing when it happens.
Okay.
It's kind of like a gut.
Are there developers that just solely go after public RFPs?
I would imagine.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We'd rather hit the fat part of the bell curve, hit base hits, hit our returns,
Yep.
give everybody their bonus and go home and not have to go through some 10-year odyssey that, has a million potential things that could go wrong and maybe, take a few dollars home at the end of it.
Right. That's true. So let's say that there's an RFP you guys issued to a few architects and, let's say there's 3 of them. We've all submitted our proposals and now we're coming in for the whole interview process. Yeah. What are you looking for in an architect? And I know there's obviously different scenarios and that kind of thing, but what are you in particular looking for when we go to those interviews?
Price is probably at the bottom of the list.
Okay.
At least at that point.
Okay.
If somebody is wildly out, obviously that's an outlier, but chemistry, team chemistry.
Okay.
Right. Because by that point, we've probably got a good idea who's going to be assigned to it from our side. And that's a real important thing that, these folks are going to work together for the next 24, 36 months. And if they hate each other week 1, it's a long slog. I'm not a fan of swapping people out. Yep. So that's going to be one. But really a lot of the stuff we mentioned earlier, the ability to sell the vision. And third, I'd say, demonstrate that you're able to listen, right? Our RFPs, I'm not sure about all the others you see, but generally they're pretty prescriptive in what we're looking for, but they leave space for you to do, what you're going to be empowered to do. Yeah. So we want to see that you've paid attention to what we've asked, but at the same time are not afraid to kind of put your trademark on it too. Okay.
Yeah, it's always a delicate thing, right? You come in, we like to personalize, especially if it's a big project, right? We like to personalize the approach, and we're coming with even a little bit of a design study where rather than sitting in front of you and saying, okay, well, we did this building, we did that building, we did this lobby, we did this, whatever. And aren't these all really nice, pretty pictures, right? We do like to come in with some design and say, hey, we thought about your project. This is what we think. But there's always that catch in there. Like, what if we totally missed the mark, right? And we try to hedge that with, this is our point of view right now, knowing no other information. This is simply a guess. So you want to say, hey, this is a guess. Look at how nice this is. Let's have a discussion around it. But if we totally miss the mark, then, then we got the next 40 minutes is going to be pretty uncomfortable.
I think it's okay, though. I think just demonstrating that you're willing to put yourself out there and take a swing at it, especially if we haven't asked for anything specific in that regard, if we've just drawn a blank box and you see if something sticks to the wall, I think that's awesome.
All right, cool. I like that.
And I've seen the latter where somebody comes in and it's a huge whiff, and I hate to admit it, but that they leave the room and we all, laugh. Yeah. Like, can you believe this?
I totally get that. Believe me, I totally
But it doesn't stop us from, engaging.
Yeah. I'm
thinking about a specific example with that story that I told, and we're under contract with them right now.
Yeah, so that's great. Yeah. Happy ending there. That's wonderful.
It's like just openness, frankness, transparency, like anything else.
I guess, how do you balance an architect's design aspirations with, the particular constraints of a project, not only budget, but just, if you're, especially let's talk about, we'll get into industrial a little bit later, but if we're doing an industrial project, and you come at it with sort of these, high concept industrial, or design ideas for an industrial building that probably at the end of the day needs to be a gray box with a nicer entry. Yeah. How do you balance that? What are you looking for in that?
I mean, practicality. But interestingly, I think we're approaching what I'll call like industrial 2.0, where something's got to give with the aesthetics of these facilities, because we're not limited right now by market demand. The vacancy rate of industrial buildings countrywide is still the envy of any asset class. What we're limited by is the NIMBYism. And the fact that most jurisdictions are terrified of these things because they have been fed stuff on Facebook or wherever else about how their water's going to get polluted, the air is going to choke you, and there's going to be trucks all over the place. And that's just, it's really just a misperception. You know, not 100%. I mean, obviously we build these facilities down the turnpike for a reason.
Right.
But in most of the cases where facilities like this are proposed, it's a huge improvement over whatever is existing there. It's either contaminated or some other highly polluting industry that, you know, when put through modern, you know, code and standards from an environmental perspective and even a building standard is a market upgrade, you know, compared to what was there. And it's just, you go through that little bit of an education process.
Yes.
So I didn't answer your question at all.
That's all right.
But I think we like to develop a working relationship with our partners where when it comes time to say, hey, like we got to cut the shit here and like get down the road on X, we're not afraid to kind of say that.
Yeah, enough's enough, guys. So tell us a little bit about your origin story. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to college?
Yeah. I was born in Dover, New Jersey. I grew up in Jefferson Township, NJ. Kind of had that 80s childhood that was, you know, pictured in every Hollywood and TV show kind of thing at the time, especially in the summer, right? Like you just leave the house in the morning and hop on your bike and disappear all day long.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah. And
your parents, like, it's no big deal.
Every once in a while, they like shout from the back porch or something. But, and now it seems like so foreign. Like what were we all thinking? But that's what I had, and it was awesome. Yeah, and I learned a ton about myself through that whole process. But so I grew up in Jefferson Township. Went to Pope John High School in Andover, Catholic high school, and then went to Fairleigh Dickinson University in Teaneck, New Jersey. So I'm Jersey through and through. Yeah.
I love it. What did you study at Fairleigh Dickinson?
Construction engineering technology.
Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to get into psychology. My dad didn't love that idea.
Okay.
So he was in the business and kind of steered me in that direction.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So what got you into the real estate and development and construction business? Yeah.
I'd say it was probably like my fourth highest choice for a career. And ultimately it was process of elimination. But no, I truly love being able to have something tangible, right, at the end of your toil, to be able to point to and say, hey, I took part in creating this. You know, in placemaking, I think it's a really spectacular way to make a living. Yeah, I agree. I love being able to go in and say, you know, I designed that, or we designed that, our firm did that. You know, there is something special about that. Or you see something on TV and it's, hey, that's our building. Right. You know, it's like, no, that's my building. I designed that. You know, it's cool. There's something always like, I don't know, it still gets me excited. Yeah. Does it excite your kids though? Because mine like don't seem enamored by it at all. We'll drive my buildings and I'm like, hey guys, check it out. Okay, Dad. Like, don't even. They even laugh at me. There's these little pavilions, these security entry pavilions that I designed in front of the United Nations. Cool. They're like screening rooms, like a TSA, but to get into there was after 9/11, and there's these little very nicely designed jewel glass boxes. Yeah. And they're tiny. They have scanners in them. People put their, you know, just like an airport, you put your stuff in there and then you go into the UN. And they laughed. They're like, you designed those? Those are so little. Ha ha. And I was like, man, screw you. They're on the UN campus. Right. It's pretty cool. Like, what are you talking about? They don't build anything on that. It's the only thing that's ever been built on that in the last 100 years. Like, leave me alone. So, you know. Yeah, I put a flagpole up in front of the Metropolitan Museum once, which I was super proud of. It's a long story. It's for another podcast, but I can't get any love for that one either. It's a flag, Dad. They're cruel. So let's shift gears and talk a little bit about your current role at Rockefeller Group. Okay. You know, you're overseeing millions and millions of square feet. Obviously, that's a big responsibility, a lot going on there. Can you give us a snapshot of what your current projects are? Yeah. We've got mostly still industrial stuff across New Jersey, much further south than we did even 4 or 5 years ago, and into Pennsylvania, much further west that we did certainly 5 years ago. I probably can't disclose specifics about projects at this point because we're still working through transactions and stuff. But we've got several good size 1.5 to 2 million square foot campuses for industrial buildings that are going to come online and light up in the next year or two. One in Carneys Point I can talk about. That's way down by the Delaware Bridge, southern tip of Jersey. That one, we're just about done with these 2 buildings. We're doing some offsite roadway improvements right now. We've got one in Spotswood, New Jersey, that is just around a 600,000 square foot building that is done. And we're hoping to get a tenant in there in short order. We've got somebody that we've been talking to. So that's exciting. And as you know, we've got something going on in Piscataway. In terms of other asset classes, I'd say we're super active in really trying to get back into the multifamily market.
Okay.
We're a touch stale. We haven't done anything really in the last 4 years or so. So like anybody else, we're hitting all the conferences, calling all the vendors. Hey, we're back doing that thing.
Okay.
So we're trying to find something that we can sink our teeth into. In that regard.
You mentioned Industrial 2.0 before.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
To me, it means the next iteration of industrial building, and you're starting to see some of them. I read an article in Developer Magazine, the NAIOP publication. I'm sure you've seen that. That talks about trophy industrial, which I think is a coined term by one of my former colleagues, which I think is pretty brilliant too. But to me, it points to like, hey, let's get a little bit more imaginative with how we think about these structures, because like it or not, they are here to stay. Everybody's got a significant proclivity to moving everything online. I'm as guilty of it as I'm sure everybody else here is. I love hitting, add to cart and having it just appear in 4 hours or whatever. It's remarkable.
It is remarkable.
And it saves us all a ton of time and resource, and talk about taking, cars off the street. All that'll come to light. But where we are today and it's a real concern. These things are, kind of uninspired looking, concrete boxes. We need to do better to, get the communities that we build in rallied around it, and understanding that, hey, like these types of tenants are going to make big donations and sponsor the Little League team and, be there at the church cook-off and all this stuff. Yeah. They can be as much a member of the community as you are. Is there
I thought about this a lot because we obviously do some industrial work and because we're in so many different sectors, just even hospitality and multifamily, is there ever a scenario where there's a mixed, version of the zoning there where you can have industrial and also, brick and mortar stores or I don't know, a hockey rink as part of an industrial, an Amazon distribution facility, right? Start to mix all those things together so it's less this big giant box that's over in the outskirts.
Yeah, I've seen it. I don't think it's at a point yet, at least to my knowledge. I'm sure it is somewhere that is completely practical. You do, depending on the location and the use and the type of tenant, have larger vehicles going in and out. So to mix that with traditional traffic and pedestrians, you can see where it starts becoming problematic. Yeah. But I think it's that kind of thinking that we need to stop being afraid of.
Yeah. Because you're right. Everybody likes to have their Amazon package. And now you can get an Amazon package. I actually unselect that option where you can have it come in the middle of the night. I find that really creepy.
Yeah.
Someone
depending who's dropping it off. Yeah. Some of them are very loud.
That's right. But everybody likes that, right? You like getting that stuff same day, but you don't want it anywhere in your town or near you. So how do you start to truly balance that? Yeah. Yeah. And then create, if malls are going away, right? What do you put in those places? Well, maybe these are that mixed use thing.
Yeah, that's what I've always said. And I've been met with tons of resistance and debate from my own colleagues and those in the industry that does not make sense. But, you look at an example like Toys R Us, right? Where they have kind of like these experiential centers now inside other department stores where they have a handful of stock, but it's really just somewhere where you can go and touch and feel and, buy it online later.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a good thought. Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. So I guess a couple more questions about the development side. So have rising interest rates, and now what looks like falling interest rates, have they affected your business directly?
Yeah. And if for nothing else, just the emotion behind it, the optics around it. When interest rates went up, we found a direct correlation to our tours by prospective tenants going down.
Okay.
Right. And I think, people will talk about the election at the time that was sort of up and coming, and that combined with raising interest rates, everybody just kind of getting on the sidelines and stretching, but not jumping into the game.
Yeah.
Now, since they've been cut one or two times, I wouldn't say transactions are kind of flying through the door, but we're touring again.
Okay.
We've sold a building again.
Okay.
Things are moving again.
Okay.
I don't think, for us, for our bottom line, it doesn't really move the needle too much in our chunk of the business anyway. I can't speak for the rest of the Rockefeller stuff in totality. But I think for our tenants and just that activity, it was more of a emotional indicator that, hey, it's okay to get back in the pool. Yeah.
Do you see, what's your outlook for the next few years?
I think it's going to be fine. Obviously, we've got a Republican administration coming in, which historically has been more business friendly, less regulation friendly. So that stuff always tends to spur the economy. But your guess is as good as mine on this one. It's going to be an interesting cycle. Yeah. But I think in general, when you go to all the cocktail parties and stuff in the industry, everybody's feeling pretty optimistic.
It's good. Yeah, listen, sometimes that's all you need, right? Is the feeling of optimism, and projects start happening.
Exactly right.
Which is great.
You say something out loud enough times, it becomes true.
Exactly. Do you see tenants, we're sitting in our design lab here with lots of technology. Do you see tenants looking for any technological advances in construction and design? Or is it, just kind of the same old, and they're just really more concentrated on the metrics of the space?
Both. I think, the tenants that are super into tech, I won't name any names, they tend to do stuff on their own. Right. So they'll go in and do their own fit out program. And it is remarkable what is inside some of these facilities. I mean, picture a 1 million square foot warehouse with just a handful of human beings working inside of it, and everything automated from, in to out. The only two people that touch a package take it off the truck, and then the other person puts it on the truck, and the rest is just all automated. It's mind boggling. So yes. But I think in general, our industry really struggles with technology and adopting it. The construction side, especially, I think construction is second to bottom in terms of adopting technology. Agriculture might be above construction. I know government and education are. Yeah, that's pretty telling. Yeah, and when you couple that with, what I keep pointing to as the productivity crisis in our industry, it really tells an important, tale. Since the 1960s, construction productivity has decreased year over year. We're about half of where we were productivity-wise 50 years ago. I don't see how that, it's a huge issue, and it's unacceptable. And I think
Why do you think that is?
A lot of reasons. Some of the stuff we touched on earlier. We all struggle to trust one another and create space. We're looking over each other's shoulders way too much. I think, labor probably should be part of the conversation. There's that perception of technology taking jobs away, but at the same time, we have a workforce issue where our labor force is aging significantly, and don't have enough new population to support it. At least that's going into the trades. And there's really no end in sight. Yeah. So it's there's probably a whole litany of reasons, but it's something that people need to pay attention to.
Yeah. No, it's You hear it all the time. There are some construction firms out there that are very advanced on the technology side. I do just wonder how practical it is when you get into the field, right? That what are you actually implementing on the technology side that's improving the construction timelines or the processes, whatever that is. So,
I mean, how about getting a building permit? Most places you work, you still have to send 6 stamped set of drawings to an office that take a week to get there, and then you wait 2 weeks and they say, I never got them. And
I will say New York City is pretty good about that.
New York City is great about that.
Everything's done online, and you can get a building permit in no time. Yeah. So, of all the bureaucracy in New York, they seem to have figured that one out.
Baby steps, I guess. But I mean, think about if we all start chipping away at stuff like that. Just the amount of projects that then could get put into production that are otherwise shelved because they're deemed untenable for cost reasons. If you get them done in, 3/4 of the time, half the time, all of a sudden that's not a problem anymore.
Yeah, time is money. Yeah. And that's how I agree. Interesting. So is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to tell the listeners?
Probably tons, yeah. I want to make a shameless plug.
Yeah, please do.
For the ACE mentorship program.
Oh, great.
Which I've been a part of in some capacity for about 2 decades now. I started here in New York when I was working in New York as a mentor. And now I serve on the executive board in New Jersey. For anybody who's not familiar with it, it's mentoring underprivileged communities and high schools in architecture, construction, and engineering. Specifically in New Jersey, we really need sponsors and volunteer mentors just about everywhere across the state. So please do contact me about how you can get involved in that.
Well, we should get involved in that because we do New York. To be honest with you, we don't do much in New Jersey.
Great.
So we'll
got a hit already.
Sign us up.
Yeah.
That's great. All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for sharing your insights here on the Anti-Architect podcast. It's been great working with you over the years.
Yeah, likewise.
And, looking forward to doing more work. You're a great client, I think, as many people will tell from this interview, just thoughtful. You're also always looking out for us as the architect, which is rare in the industry. So I thank you very much.
Well, I think that's part of what we touched on a minute ago, right?
Yeah.
I know you're trying to wrap up here,
No, it's all good.
What I always say to our team is, hey, this project team, we've all got to walk away from this thing feeling successful. Yeah. Right? Nobody can turn around and say, oh, that was terrible, or I got screwed, because that's the worst thing that can be walking around in the market.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
To some degree.
And
in some cases.
You're going to work together again in the future in some other way, right?
Absolutely. So if we can pull that off and have some fun doing it, life's too short otherwise.
Love it. So to learn more about Mike, please visit RockefellerGroup.com. You can find him on LinkedIn. And ACE mentorship program for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Good seeing you.
You too.